Hey friends, Curtis Stone here. Today I want to talk about 8 ways that you can protect your farm or your homestead or your land-based business, whatever, from the government. There's been a lot of controversy over the last year, and especially in the last few months, about this ostrich farm in British Columbia, which is where I live. And a lot of it is what happened was wrong, okay? The government killing those animals, especially sniping them out, was insane. You have to admit that. But at the same time, government does what they do because you agree. The entire system that we have in Western law is based on a term called voluntary compliance. It means that you agreed in one way or another. Now, how you agreed is specific to everybody's situation. And I would make a pretty hard bargain on the reason that went down the way it did with the ostrich farm is that they agreed to comply with the CFIA at some point or another. The CFIA is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I had a run-in with them back in 2017 and they never bothered me again because I followed some of these basic principles that I'm going to share with you today. Eight things. I'm not going to give you my specific remedy, but if you drill into what I'm going to explain to you and understand it from a principled standpoint, the same would apply. But the reason that I'm assuming things went the way they did is that they agreed either tacitly or directly agreed. Now, to my knowledge, they were doing research regarding vaccines, antibodies or something like that for a Japanese corporation. Now, corporations, large-scale corporations, and especially international corporations are kings of compliance, as I call them, or queens of compliance. And if they're going to do business or operate some kind of research in another country, they're going to comply voluntarily to the statutes and regulations of the health authorities. In this case, it's the CFIA. So the ostrich farm was never a farm. It's not a farm that produces a good. They don't produce ostrich eggs for sale. They're not selling at the farmer's market, none of that. They were doing business with big business. And so that's all I'm going to say there. And then we're going to get into these 8, and it might illustrate a little bit more how you could protect yourself and perhaps why they got themselves into that mess. So my heart goes out to that happening. And all we can do now at this point is learn from the past and learn from their mistakes. And you can take my words and hopefully you can avoid getting yourself into a situation like this in the future. So the first one, number 1, is don't take money from the government. Okay? And I'm not making the claim that the ostrich farm made all of these at all. I'm just saying if you want to avoid them screwing you over and killing your animals or whatever it is coming on your property, follow these 8 things. So the first thing is, and I got some notes here, don't work for the government, okay? Don't do research for them. Don't take their SRED. SRED is a government grant program to do research in Canada. Don't take that. Don't take any type of money from the government. Any of their funding, any of their programs. And if you do, make sure you read every single word in their contract. There's an old saying that who pays the piper calls the tune. So if you're going to work for the government, expect the government to do government things to you. Second thing is do not work with or for large corporations. Large corporations are queens and kings of compliance. And policies are often set by large corporations. We also know this as corporate capture. This is how we have large business dictating the policies for small businesses, which often screws them over. And it's how large businesses keep out the competition, is they lobby the government because they can afford to, So they lobby the government to set certain policies that dictate the policies for small businesses, which is unfortunate and terrible, but it's true. Okay, so don't work for large corporations. So if you're a small farm, don't sell your product to GFS and Cisco, because they're going to all be following GAP certification and things like that. So don't work with big business. Okay, that's number 2. Third thing is, don't register your animals. Don't get a PID number, a premise ID number. Don't do any of that stuff. Don't register things. And there's more to speak on that, but don't register your animals, okay? The fourth one ties into this. Don't register your infrastructure. Now, you can take that as far as you're comfortable with. People assume that you have to register things. This is not the case at all, okay? And I'll speak to more of this on the end, but on the last one, people assume that things have to be registered. If you go look up the term register in Black's Law Dictionary, to register is basically to forfeit ownership or right to something. And so to register is to basically give it to the government in some way. We do this with even our children when we register their births. To register is to reggie, it all goes into these Latin maxims, but to register is to basically give it away to a higher authority. So don't do that. Don't register your infrastructure. Don't register your animals. Number 5, work in the private as much as you possibly can and develop personal relationships with your clients. So there is a maxim of law that basically stipulates, and I'll paste it in here, that contracts are superior to law. So a private contract between 2 individuals is superior to any statute or ordinance. Now, where people will get screwed up on this is they'll say, well, Curtis, I made a contract, but then the CFIA came and did this, that, and the other. Well, you might have already agreed to their stuff. You just didn't know it. Now, one thing you got to learn about law is a thing called tacit agreement. T-I-C-I-T. Tacit. It means that you comply because you didn't respond. So you may have got a letter in the mail that said something and you didn't respond. And there was a stipulation on the back of that letter when they sent it to you that said, if you don't respond in 21 days, we're going to assume that you accept or comply. So the devil's always in the details. The details are specific to the situation and the context that you're in. So that can go really deep and it always needs to be explored. But working in the private is to individually contract with individuals. There's things also called PMAs, private members associations. This is nothing new, and it's what more and more people are going to have to do as the times get crazier and crazier, as the government continues to overreach and make us, quote unquote, offers we can't refuse. We need to work in the private. And that we can go really deep on that one. We won't in this video, perhaps in another one I will, but work in the private, contract with private individuals. Number 6, do as many transactions as possible with cash, crypto, metals, anything that doesn't require a KYC, which is a know your customer. So a know your customer would be Interact, debit, credit cards, anything in the legacy system is going to have a KYC, know your customer. So use as many means as you possibly can to transact in the private. Okay? Crypto, metals, cash, all of these things are private. Though, some cryptos actually have a ledger. And if that ledger is tied to, let's say you're transacting in Bitcoin, but you've been using your Bitcoin and you hold Bitcoin in an exchange, and that exchange produces a government slip of some kind, the government knows what your crypto address is. So there's all kinds of ways around that. Look it up. You can go a lot deeper into that whole conversation. But there's a lot more to be said about that. But the fundamental thing is, don't use money that has a KYC, okay? Number 7 is find alternative ways to fund your projects. A big challenge that people run into with their homesteads or their farms is that they need to fund them some way. So they might need a mortgage, they might need some kind of loan. And this is often where they get you, is that in order to get a loan, you need to have insurance. And there's often a clause in insurance policies that says you agree to follow the local statutes and ordinances of blah, blah, blah. Municipality, county, province, nation, state, whatever. So if you find alternative ways, now what are some alternative ways to fund things? A classic one that I've been talking about for probably over 10 years now would be a CSA, a community supported agriculture. So you ask your customers to prepay for a season's worth of produce. They pay up front. So they might pay, $500 or $800 between there somewhere for a season's worth of produce. That funds your farm at the beginning of the season. And then you use that money to purchase your initial seeds, maybe buy a new piece of infrastructure for the farm or whatever it is. There's all kinds of ways to fund things privately. Go to neighbors, go to friends, go to family. There's all kinds of ways to do this. The last one is, don't be intimidated by people with badges. Don't be intimidated when somebody from the CFIA calls you or the USDA calls you and says, oh, I'm from so-and-so agency and you're going to need to comply with blah, blah, blah because of article blah, blah, blah. If anything that is being proposed to you requires a signature, that in and of itself is evidence that it's voluntary. Because if it wasn't voluntary, they wouldn't need you to sign. The fact that the system requires signatures is evidence alone that it's voluntary, because they need you to comply. And if they need you to comply via a signature, then it is voluntary. If they got you to comply without a signature, they would just hold a gun to your head and you would comply. That would be direct coercion. And this is why we actually don't live in a fully coercive state. We live in a quasi-coercive state where the illusion of government tricks you to believe that you must comply. But again, if you need to sign, that is evidence that it is not coercive. It's just you're assuming that it is. And it's your acquiescence because of your ignorance that gets you into these contracts. So those are my 8. And don't be intimidated by these people. Just because they're showing up with a badge, it doesn't mean anything. The entire system is based on fear and ignorance. It's your ignorance of the law, number 1, but also your fear of the state. And this is where a lot of people, truthers and anarchists and whatnot, are often kings of compliance themselves, because they're so afraid of actions from the state that they just throw their hands up and give up. Don't give that to them. The government is essentially a bully. They are like a high school locker room bully who's not looking for a fight, but they're looking for a victim. And so when that bully comes into the high school locker room, any boy who has gone through the public school system has experienced this, where there's sort of a, the saying goes, hurt people hurt people. So, there's some alpha male boy in the school who has been neglected by his father or abused in some way, and he's coming in the room and he's pushing everybody around, and he pushes one guy and that guy just stands there and takes it. He pushes another guy and his little followers giggle along. But when he comes to you and he pushes you, instead of taking it, you fucking hammer him across the head. And he didn't see it coming. And he realizes at that point, it's not worth the fight because he's not looking for a fight. He's just looking for a victim. That's the government. That's what the government does. They bully you through intimidation of piles of paper and legalese, hoping that you're not going to look deeper. They just want you to go along to get along. And by acquiescing, everybody else does, because it's the sheepdog that polices the sheep. The farmer just kind of sits back and lets it all happen. And so we saw this during COVID, all this kind of stuff. So don't be intimidated by them. So that's what I would say. Those are your 8. You don't have to comply to any of this stuff. Remember, if it requires a signature, it's voluntary. Just because you haven't figured it out doesn't mean that you have to acquiesce. There's always a remedy. There's always an answer. So if you guys like that, smash the like, subscribe to this channel. Let me know your thoughts. Did I miss any? Also, I've got a Firewood course coming out. It's been a year in the making. It's not a huge course, but it's very concise, and it shows all the systems on my homestead, from my 2 different types of wood stoves in my home, my wood boiler, how I boil water and use wood to heat my entire domestic hot water system, what's the right equipment to use, how to season, what are the right techniques, all of this stuff. I'll have a trailer for it right into this video, and you can check that out. All right, folks, I'll see you in the next one. We all know that firewood is critical to any homestead, especially if you live in a cold climate. But when you're at the very start of your homesteading journey and it's the first season on your land, to be honest, is firewood at the forefront of your mind? The truth is, there are so many other things to consider when you're rushing towards winter and building your homestead that firewood is often left to the last minute. For those of us already on the land, we've been there, trust me. So why not let us share with you some strategies that'll help you be more efficient, waste less time, and know for certain that your family will be warm in the winter. My name is Curtis Stone, and over the last 10 years, I've helped thousands of individuals and families across North America learn how to homestead. And here's the thing, there's so much to think about with homesteading that basic skills are often overlooked or simply forgotten about. And firewood is one of those skills. If you live in a cold climate where a stove is a non-negotiable, you want to make sure that you're prepped and ready for when the temperature drops. In my masterclass, I'll teach you how to select the best firewood in your area for heat, burn time, and minimal smoke and smell. I'll also teach you different techniques for splitting, kindling, and storage with the goal of maximizing your efficiency and time spent. I'll then show you how to best operate your wood stove, reduce smoke, increase burn time, and maximize heat dispersion. It doesn't matter if you live in North America, Europe, or in any other cold climate, you'll be able to apply what you learn to where you live. This will completely change how you think about firewood, prep, and storage. You'll be faster, you'll be more confident, and you'll be warm. Join me. I look forward to seeing you in the course.